The news said a murderer was on the run. My boyfriend sent me a message. I heard that guy is a serial killer, targeting young women. You must be careful. Honey, I'm at the door. Oh, I forgot the house code again. Can you help me open it? Just as I was about to open the door, I glanced through the peephole on a hunch, and to my shock, standing outside was that very killer. But he didn't know, I had been waiting for him a long time. When the wanted alert popped up on my phone, I casually forwarded it to Willie. Willie quickly replied, "Honey, you really must stay safe. That guy is a serial killer, preying on young women." I sent a speechless emoji. Aren't you hoping I'll hit like? I'm not that unlucky. By the way, when will you be home? A week ago, Willie was sent on a business trip out of town by the company. We had agreed he would be back today. But now it's already past 10, and he still hasn't returned. I glanced out the window, only a few streetlights were sparsely lit outside. This is a new neighborhood, and Willie and I just moved in not long ago. It's getting late, and since not many people live here, there's hardly any foot traffic. Lost in thought, my phone vibrated. Willie sent another message. Honey, I'm at the door. What's our door code again? I forgot it. Can you let me in? Willie's back? Where did he come from? I was just watching downstairs and didn't see anyone enter the building at all. Bang bang bang. There was a knock at the door. Hurry up and open the door, honey. I've been on planes all day and I'm exhausted. It was Willie. He used to love surprising me by suddenly appearing out of nowhere. I never thought this time he'd mess up and even forget the house code. I hurried over, my hand already on the doorknob, but somehow I suddenly stopped. It was that news today, it left me feeling unsettled. I leaned into the peephole and looked outside. A man wearing a baseball cap stood at the door. The shadows hid the upper half of his face, and he was wearing a black down jacket just like Willie's. I let out a breath, silently scolding myself for being paranoid. But in the next moment, something suddenly came to mind. Where was Willie's suitcase? When he went on his business trip, I had helped him pack a huge suitcase. Why wasn't it here now? To be sure, I peeked again. It really wasn't there. Leaning against the door, I could feel my heart pounding fiercely. At this moment, the man outside seemed to be growing impatient. He instinctively twisted his neck. Soon, that ordinary yet sinister face was fully exposed under the hallway light. A chill shot up the back of my neck. He wasn't Willie. I had just seen that face, it was clearly the wanted criminal from the news. I was so scared that I took a few steps back abruptly. But soon, I realized my mistake. That person must have heard it. The surroundings were deathly silent, and I froze in place without moving. I don't know how much time passed before a sudden thumping came from the door. It was the sound of knuckles banging against the door panel. The man's voice was thick with sleaze and malice. You found out so quickly? How boring. I was actually hoping to play a little game. This pervert. I tried to stay calm, but my voice trembled uncontrollably. I've already called the police. They'll be here any minute. If you know what's good for you, you'd better leave now. The call to the police hadn't even ended, and the female officer's voice on the line grew serious. Don't panic. We've already sent colleagues over. They'll be there in at most 20 minutes. You must stay inside the house and not come out. 20 minutes? At this moment, I was filled with regret, my guts turning sour. If only I hadn't chosen such a remote house when I picked this place. My voice trembled as I said, "Please hurry, okay? That person hasn't left yet." Yes, although it had gone quiet outside again, I could feel it. That murderer hadn't left at all. Perhaps to confirm my suspicion, soon a beeping sound came from the door. That was the sound of a code being entered. Fear gripped me like an invisible hand tightening around my neck. That person knew my house's code. How could he possibly know my house's code? He had been chatting with me using Willie's WeChat, even wearing Willie's clothes. Could it be Willie? Waves of cold dread surged from the depths of my heart. but I couldn't afford to think any further. The faint dripping sound at the door, usually barely noticeable, now rang in my ears like the death knell tolling for me. In a panic, I rushed to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. The blade gleamed coldly under the light, but it brought me no comfort at all. Men and women are naturally unequal in strength. If he really came through that door, I feared I would only be a helpless victim. Cold sweat dripped down my forehead in beads, but I couldn't care less. I wished I could focus all my attention on the door. The fingerprint password lock at my house is set to 10 digits, that's Willie's habit. I used to think it was a hassle to press so many buttons, but now I feel it's not long enough. 1 press. 2 presses. 3 presses. Until, password unlock failed. Hiding in the corner of the kitchen, I let out a big sigh of relief. That's right, how could I forget? I just changed the password this afternoon at the last minute. My mind went completely blank just now, and I actually forgot something so important. The person outside didn't seem to expect this surprise either. The beeping sounded again. Password unlock failed. Password unlock failed. The warning sounds kept coming, and in frustration, the man started kicking the door. Damn woman, don't let me catch you, or I swear I'll make you die a miserable death. This door was specially installed as a thickened security door. When Willie installed it, he even told me, "Honey, I often work late and come home very late. If we install a better door, I'd feel more at ease when you're home." Thinking of Willie, tears welled up in my eyes. He's so good, he'll definitely be fine. Time ticked by, but the banging on the door showed no sign of stopping. I felt my breathing growing more difficult. My body tensed up in waves, and somehow the screen of the phone in my hand had lit up without me realizing. One message after another popped up on the screen. What's going on the 12th floor? It's so late and they're still banging and crashing nonstop. Don't they care if others want to sleep? Exactly, it's so noisy. Getting neighbors like this is really bad luck. I've seen the couple living on the 12th floor. The guy looks so refined, and the girl is pretty too. Didn't expect them to be so rude. Property management, can you come out and take care of this? When we bought the building, it was because of your service. Why is no one around now? Property management? Right, how could I forget about them? This is a high-end community. Not only is there a security guard on duty at the entrance, but each building also has someone on watch. I quickly opened WeChat to check. The message was sent 2 minutes ago, and sure enough, there was a reply from property management further down. Dear residents, please rest assured, we have already arranged for security to go and check. Someone is coming? My eyes lit up. I was about to type a message warning them that the people outside were dangerous and that the elevator shouldn't be used. But soon, I heard the ding of the elevator arriving. The security guard got here that fast? No, if he opens the elevator door now, wouldn't he run right into that murderer? Thinking this, I immediately shouted, "Don't open the elevator yet, there's a killer outside." But I still shouted too slowly. Soon, the security guard's angry voice rang out, "Who's there? What are you doing here?" Loud banging sounds came from outside the door. They had started fighting. I had once crossed paths with the security guard on the first floor. He was a man who looked very strong. He should be able to handle him, right? Hiding inside, I felt like each day was a year. I don't know how long passed before a muffled cry of pain reached my ears, followed by a series of footsteps gradually fading away. Immediately after, someone knocked on my door. "Are you the owner of 1205? I'm the security guard downstairs. That guy already ran off, but he just stabbed me. Do you have a first aid kit at home? Can you help me stop the bleeding first?" He really ran? I hurried to the door. Sure enough, the man in the down jacket was gone, and only the security guard remained in the hallway, bent over and clutching his stomach weakly. Thank goodness. I'm finally saved. At this moment, my tense body finally relaxed completely. I slumped against the door, feeling waves of soreness ripple through every muscle. "Owner of 1205, are you still there?" Can you open the door and help me? Perhaps because of the pain, the guard hung his head low, his weak voice tinged with urgency. Thinking of how he got hurt trying to save me, guilt welled up inside me. Just as I reached to unlock the door, I hesitated. Everything that happened today was just too strange. That murderer first disguised himself as Willie to deceive me, which shows he was not only ruthless but also very cunning. Could he really have been chased away so easily by the security guard? He wouldn't be hiding in the stairwell, waiting for me to open the door so he could slip in, would he? Now that the security guard is injured, if he suddenly rushes in, I won't have any means to defend myself. As I hesitated, louder, more agitated knocking came from outside the door. Resident, I saved you out of kindness, and you're going to repay kindness with ingratitude by refusing to be saved? Yeah, they saved me, yet here I am, still overthinking everything. Saving lives is the priority, I couldn't afford to think any further. I pressed lightly on the doorknob. A wisp of air slipped in through the crack of the slightly open door. At that moment, my phone lit up again, as if I had pressed something by accident. On the screen, messages quickly flashed through the homeowners group chat. It seems quiet now. Didn't expect the property management to be so efficient, resolving everything in such a short time. Upstairs neighbors, this is a high-end community. If the property management didn't work, wouldn't our expensive fees be a waste? Forget it. When I passed by the first floor last night, I didn't see anyone on duty. I asked around and found out the security guard on duty today took a day off, and they didn't arrange a replacement. They just take all that property fee money for show. My pupils suddenly contracted, a chill rising up my spine. It had only been about 3 minutes since the first feedback appeared in the group and the security guard showed up at my door. Although each building had dedicated security guards on duty. But to ensure ample greenery, the two buildings in the complex were spaced quite far apart, usually taking an adult 5 to 6 minutes to walk between them. They simply wouldn't have enough time to rush over in such a short span. If the security guard on the first floor had taken a day off, then, who was the person outside the door now? A bad premonition welled up inside me, and my first instinct was to shut the door again. But it was already too late. Just as I was about to act, a hand squeezed through the gap of the ajar door. Owner, why the rush? You haven't even healed my wounds yet. The security guard's slimy, lecherous voice whispered by the door. He really was lying to me. Dropping the act, the guard pressed against the door and began pushing hard to get inside. I almost used every ounce of my strength to hold the door shut, not daring to let go, but this resistance was nothing more than a joke in front of a grown man. Worse still, footsteps were rapidly approaching us. The murderer hadn't left after all, he was lurking in the shadows, watching us. My whole body trembled, the intense tension turning my mind into a chaotic mess, until a cold blade suddenly cut through my finger. I had been so tense that I completely forgot I still had a knife in my hand. I raised my hand and slashed hard, and blood instantly gushed from the security guard's torn wound. He let out a miserable scream and instinctively pulled his hand back. Almost at that moment, I suddenly pushed with all my might, closing the door that had been pried open just a crack, then locked it again. And at that moment, the ghostly footsteps came to an almost complete stop right outside the door. My heart was pounding so violently it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I forced my voice to remain calm. The police are coming soon. If you know what's good for you, leave immediately. The people outside stood silently, confronting me. I lost track of time until footsteps sounded again, and two figures moved away, one after the other. Watching the corridor empty out, the tension I'd been holding on to finally released completely. They really left. At that moment, I felt waves of exhaustion wash over me. My legs could no longer support me, and I collapsed onto the floor. But just as I thought I had escaped, a cracking sound came from the balcony. I hurried to the window and leaned out to look down. In the pitch-black night, half of a man's body was already climbing onto my balcony. Downstairs from my place lives a young couple who bought a 3-bedroom apartment. Since they were about to start renovations recently and didn't want to disturb the neighbors, they even came up to visit me. I guess because the apartment was empty and bare, sometimes they would even forget to close the door. But now it's become a torment for me. When he saw that I had caught him, the man showed no surprise at all. Instead, he flashed a cocky grin. At that moment, he grabbed the security window bars with both hands and forcefully pried them apart. The stainless steel rods immediately emitted a series of cracking sounds. My eyelids twitched sharply. Damn it. Just a couple of days ago, I noticed that 2 bars on the balcony's security grill had come loose, and I hadn't gotten around to fixing them yet. I can't let this continue. I grabbed the nearby vase and teacup and hurled them in his direction. Die. You murderous bastard. One of the teacups struck the man's forehead, blood splattering from the wound. He chuckled softly, seemingly unfazed by the pain. At this moment, 2 of the stainless steel bars had already been bent into an arc by him, his leg slipped through, and he was trying to squeeze his entire body inside. I can't wait any longer. I know I have nowhere left to retreat. If I run out the door now, I'm probably walking straight into the arms of that security guard accomplice. And if he gets in? Thinking of this, I didn't dare hesitate for another second and swung my knife at him. The man was hanging from the windowsill, only able to free one hand to block. Although he was ruthless, he was at a disadvantage, and soon several cuts appeared on his arm from my blade. But these wounds didn't make him retreat, instead, they ignited his ferocity. His face twisted into an even more savage snarl. You filthy bitch, just wait, I'll make you die even worse than those other women. I recalled the news I had seen online before. This killer specifically targeted young women in their 20s, and after killing them, he would desecrate their bodies. Even in death, I refused to die with such humiliation. Suddenly, a surge of desperate courage welled up inside me. Summoning all my strength, I swung the knife again and charged forward. Today, it would be either him or me. The blade struck right into his shoulder, and the man let out a miserable scream. But before I could even feel relieved, I realized the knife was deeply stuck in his flesh and couldn't be pulled out. At that moment, several cracking sounds came from the window. 2 of the security bars had been completely bent out by him. Ignoring the knife still half embedded in his body, the man quickly slipped inside and climbed onto the windowsill. His movements were so fast that just as I was about to turn and run, a sharp pain shot through my scalp. He had grabbed a handful of my hair. I thought I had nowhere left to run. But then, with a bang, the door was suddenly flung open. Several uniformed police officers rushed in. The lead officer, a man, saw the man pressing the knife to my neck and shouted angrily, "Let her go." The man, however, seemed not the least bit afraid. He chuckled twice, then suddenly gripped hard with his hand. The blade sliced through the skin of my neck, and warm liquid began to flow out. But before I could even react, a loud gunshot rang sharply in my ear. The heavy body behind me suddenly went limp, collapsing forward and pinning me down. Wrapped in a blanket, I sat inside the police station. Thinking back to the earlier scene, my body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Seeing that I still seemed dazed, Detective Mason sighed, poured a glass of water, and handed it to me. "Don't be afraid, you've been rescued. Good thing you told us the door code over the phone, otherwise." He didn't finish his sentence. Suddenly, I remembered something and grabbed his arm tightly. "Mason, my boyfriend Willie is still in their hands. You have to save him." Although the killer was using Willie's phone, he had only been killing women before. Maybe there was still a chance to save Willie. As long as there was even a glimmer of hope, I wasn't willing to give up. Mason was momentarily stunned. He glanced at the hand I was holding and was about to speak when a voice interrupted. "Emma." I turned around in disbelief, meeting Willie's anxious gaze. He rushed over and pulled me into his arms, his strength seeming as if he wanted to embed me into his chest bone. "Honey, I'm so glad you're okay. You nearly scared me to death." My mind was spinning, still unable to believe he had just appeared before me like this. "Willie, are you all right?" Willie let go of me, his face full of guilt. "I'm fine. I was just knocked out and left in the airport bathroom. When I woke up, I found my phone and wallet were gone, and even my suitcase had been rummaged through. I thought I had been robbed. After reporting it to the police, I found out that the murderer had actually used my phone to come after you. He cupped my cheeks with both hands and pressed a firm kiss onto my brow. Wife, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Luckily, you're okay, otherwise I would never forgive myself. I shook my head and threw myself into his arms. As long as you're fine. It wasn't his fault to begin with. Seeing him safe and sound in front of me, I could only feel that heaven had shown mercy. Once my emotions settled, Willie stayed with me while I gave my statement. Strangely, Mason only asked me a few token questions and instead grilled Willie thoroughly. His sharp gaze fixed unwaveringly on Willie, as if trying to detect some clue from him. I was puzzled, and Willie's expression grew grim. By the time everything was over, it was already 3 a.m. Just as we were about to step out of the police station, Mason called out to me again. Willie couldn't hold back any longer. He looked at Mason with a gaze I barely recognized. Officer G, my girlfriend has already been through enough shock today. Are you guys ever going to be done? Mason didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to me. Emma, this is my number. Please don't hesitate to contact me if anything comes up. Though Willie's face darkened, I still reached out to take it. Because at that moment, a sudden thought struck me: the murderer may have been shot dead on the spot, but his accomplice, the security guard, was nowhere to be found. Thinking that someone might still be lurking in the shadows, I didn't dare return to the old house. Willie was very understanding and helped me move. Everything seemed to have returned to calm. Only Mason often contacted me and would ask about Willie. I didn't know why he was so fixated on Willie. After a few times, I got annoyed. Mason, you should be focusing all your energy on that escaped security guard, not making baseless guesses about my boyfriend. Mason was silent for a long time before speaking again. Emma, when you were in danger, your boyfriend Willie's phone and wallet were stolen, and these ended up in the hands of the serial killer. Don't you think it's all too coincidental? My police instincts tell me there aren't that many coincidences in this world. I chuckled softly. Mason, that's just your guess. With that, I hung up the phone. Footsteps came from behind me, and I turned around to see Willie. He walked over and handed me a cup of warm milk. What's wrong? You look terrible. Did something happen? I shook my head, not wanting to trouble him with these matters, and brushed it off casually. Willie was such a good person, there was no way he could be a bad guy. Since that incident, he had been taking time off to stay home with me. Every night, he would make me a cup of milk and watch me close my eyes and fall asleep before returning to the study to tackle his piled-up work. Under his soothing words, the tension in my heart gradually eased. But perhaps Mason's phone call still lingered in my mind, because that night, for some reason, I suddenly woke up from a nightmare. I rubbed my dizzy head and was about to get up when I suddenly heard 2 people talking in the living room. I froze instantly, because one of the voices was one I would never forget for the rest of my life. It was that security guard. How could he be in my living room, together with my boyfriend Willie? I couldn't believe what was happening before my eyes. Willie came from a wealthy family with a bright future. How could he be involved with such a desperate fugitive? And worse, they wanted to kill me. Could it be true what Mason said, that Willie has a problem? A ridiculous, panic-stricken feeling swept over me. I couldn't think of anything else and quickly pulled out my phone to call Mason. Unfortunately, just as the call connected, the person outside seemed to sense something and footsteps began approaching my direction. I had no choice but to shove the phone into the pocket of my skirt, then climbed onto the bed, closing my eyes and pretending nothing had happened. Soon, the door was pushed open, footsteps drew closer, and then stopped right beside the bed. Lying still with my eyes closed, I dared not move a muscle, only feeling a pair of eyes quietly watching me. The invisible gaze was like a sharp blade, scraping inch by inch across my skin, sending a cold sweat down my back. The hand under the quilt clenched tightly, unable to help itself. I lost track of time, and just when I thought I was about to escape unscathed, Willie leaned close to my ear, chuckling softly. Honey, what now? You still found out. I was tied up by them and thrown onto the living room floor. Compared to the security guard's excited expression, Willie's face was utterly indifferent. In my memory, he was gentle and considerate. Even if he upset me, he would be the first to apologize. I had always believed that the greatest fortune of my life was meeting him. But I never imagined that the person beside me in bed was a demon. Tears streaming down, I demanded, "Why are you doing this to me?" The security guard laughed arrogantly. "Ha ha ha, Willie, you've been acting so well all along. That silly woman really thinks you're a good guy." Willie frowned but still didn't say a word in response. Cold tears traced down my cheeks, each one hitting the floor with a soft thud. I remembered the first time I met Willie. It was at a coffee shop. I tripped over a child and spilled an entire cup of iced Americano on his expensive white shirt. It was a cliché beginning, but as Willie and I slowly got closer, we found we surprisingly got along well. Later, when he confessed to me, I didn't hesitate for even a second before saying yes. When love was at its peak, Willie once looked at me with infatuation, saying I was the woman he loved most in his life. I never imagined that the way he loved me would be like this. The security guard's sticky gaze roamed over me, his mouth constantly clicking. "Willie, you really know how to pick them. This one's even better than the last. How about we play that game again? This time I go first." I still can't forget the look in that girl's eyes before she died, truly beautiful. I didn't know what game they wanted to play, but the meaning behind his words was clearly sinister. "What do you want to do?" "Do what?" The security guard flared his nostrils, his whole body becoming unnervingly excited. He tapped my cheek with the back of his knife. "You'll find out what I want to do soon enough." The cold metal against my skin made my hair stand on end, and I instinctively struggled. But the security guard had already lunged at me. Soon, a ripping sound tore through the air as he tore open my skirt. "Get away, just get away from me." I dodged his outstretched hand, tears finally breaking free as I shouted at Willie. "Willie, do you have any conscience left? We were together once, at least. How can you just let him humiliate me like this?" They were on the same side after all. I didn't expect any response. But to my utter disbelief, Willie actually charged forward. In my terrified gaze, he plunged his knife into the security guard's back. I don't even know how everything that followed happened. By the time I came to my senses, they were already tangled up in a fierce fight. Willie's punches landed with solid force, quickly leaving the security guard bruised and battered. The guard wasn't one to back down either. Wielding a knife, he aimed straight for Willie's vital spots. Willie was strong, but because he started off at a disadvantage, the guard managed to stab him first. In the end, the guard collapsed from excessive blood loss, swallowing his last breath unwillingly. I was almost moved to tears of joy. "Willie, we won." I never expected that Willie would ultimately choose to save me. At this moment, Willie was covered in blood. He looked at me with a strange expression. "We? You're so naive. How could you think I killed him for you?" I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over me, instantly frozen. "What do you mean by that?" Willie smiled, but there was not a trace of warmth in that smile. "That idiot and his brother got themselves into trouble and kept threatening me. I've long wanted to get rid of him. Isn't now the perfect time? He broke into my house, killed my girlfriend, and after I fought him, I ended up killing him instead. How do you think this ending is?" So this was his intention all along. The ridiculous part was that I actually thought he had truly repented. He staggered over to me, gently touched my cheek with pity, as if filled with endless affection. "Wife, since you love me so much, then use your death to do one last thing for me. Don't worry, from now on, I will visit your grave and offer incense every year. Beast, you deserve to die." My eyes were cold, as if looking at the most disgusting thing in the world. "Call me whatever you want, it's all going to end anyway." Willie shrugged, looking indifferent. He shoved the knife into the security guard's hand, gripping it and bringing his hand closer to me. "Wife, if it weren't for necessity, I really wouldn't want to kill you, because you really look a lot like her." Unfortunately, this time, he didn't have the chance to act. Willie looked at his chest in disbelief. You. I suppose my gaze must have been icy cold at that moment, which is why he was so shocked. But there wasn't much time left for him. Because at that moment, the knife I held was plunged straight into his heart. I twisted the knife forcefully, and Willie collapsed, his eyes filled with unwillingness and confusion. Unfortunately, he would never get the answer. And amidst the sea of blood, I smiled and closed my eyes. Before slipping into darkness, I heard the door being slammed open. Mason had finally arrived.